Hello, my name is Dewey, and today we're going to be doing our 6th lesson in this video series, which is about tuples. So we talked about previously whereby there are 4 built-in data structures in Python, where these aren't just two variable data types, but rather structures we can use to store multiple pieces of data in one structure. So we talked about lists, we talked about sets in the previous lessons, and now we're going to move on to something called tuples. So what exactly are tuples? Well, it sounds like a fancy name, but let's get right into it so you know exactly what we're dealing with. So tuple is a collection which is ordered and unchangeable. So how is that different and similar at the same time to what we've dealt with previously in the case of lists and sets? So this is ordered. So tuple is like a list in that sense. It's an ordered list of values, right? But it's also unchangeable, which is therefore similar to sets. It asks for duplicate values, which is also similar to lists, because you can have duplicate values in lists, not as true for sets, but it can vary, of course. It's also written with round brackets, which means that the way we define these tuples is different to the way we define our lists and sets. And that's very key, because in these programming languages, we need to be very, very sure of how we're defining these data structures, right? And therefore, we have distinct ways to define them with different bracket types. So why would you want an unchangeable collection? Well, there are a couple of reasons, and let's look at the properties to understand why. So the properties of tuples are they can be any data type or a mix of several. That sounds pretty familiar, but we'll talk about where the familiarity comes from in a second. We can access an item using its index value. We can use a length function to find the length. I can loop through a tuple using a for loop. Does that sound familiar? It should. These are exactly the properties of a list. So quick syntax reminder, again, like I said earlier, you use normal curved brackets, parentheses really, in American English, to define how we are getting the data structures inside the data. So the data that we have in this case is hello, world, and yay as strings. These are 3 strings. Okay, so we're separating them by commas, and we define them using parentheses outside of the first value, and at the start of the first value, and at the end of the last value. My tuple 0, hello. My tuple 2, hello world. Right, so this is an important thing to keep in mind. Because we can use index values, it can therefore output the specific value at that particular index. And the reason is because it's an ordered list. In case of sets, because it's unordered, it doesn't have a specific index value. The value index 0 doesn't exist because there is no index 0 in the case of sets. In the case of tuples, because it's an ordered list, there are specific index values. Let's take an example. You also see that to be a colon 2. What it essentially means is that you have 2 values being outputted, hello and world, first 2 values. Length of my tuple is 3 because you have 3 elements inside that tuple. So it's 2 tuple methods that we mainly use on a day-to-day basis when we are dealing with tuples. And tuples are, again, a little bit more of a niche category. Dictionaries, on the other hand, which is another data type which will be focused on in the previous lesson, the next lesson, apologies, are much, much more common. Okay, and so are lists, as mentioned in the previous lessons. So the 2 methods here that we really mainly deal with are count and index. So count returns the number of times a specific value occurs in a tuple. So in this case, Bob, John, even Bob are name values. These are our string values. So Bob is therefore, we're assigning that value to Bob count. So names.count of Bob means assigning the number of times Bob appears to the variable Bob count. And because Bob appears twice, therefore the value of Bob count would be 2. On the other hand, index searches a tuple for a specified value and returns the position of where it was found. So index John for Bob count, well, I've used Bob count here twice. I actually should have called it John count, but that's a typo, ignore it. But anyway, that value for names.index John tells us that the index value of John would be 1, because we know, as we've dealt with previously, the index value is 1 less than what it would normally be if we were to talk about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if we were to do Bob as 1, John as 2, Eve as 3, and Bob again as 4 in normal sequential sequencing terms, well, in programming, we do 1 less. It would be 0, 1, 2, 3, which means that 1 is the index value for John. If it's not found, therefore there's no value assigned. If there are duplicate items, then the first item is given for the index function. So if John appears twice, then we actually still give 1, because that's the first time John appears when the function is going through that tuple. So a little practice test. So what is the syntax to create a list, a set, a dictionary, a tuple? Okay, so you can only answer 1, 2, and 4 for now. I've just included 3 in case you want to give a shot at it, maybe predict it, but 1, 2, and 4 are the ones you can mainly do right now. So list, square brackets, set, curly brackets. Dictionary, also curly brackets, but you'll see a very key difference with the colons. Again, we'll get into that. We'll get into how the colon and stuff works in the next lesson. Just keep in mind you use colons and stuff, commas set to link values and whatnot in dictionary versus set. And as I mentioned earlier in tuple, round brackets, i.e. parentheses. Let's go. So if we want to check if all items in the following tuple are the same. So if we want to do that, then here's the function. We have a function here, def check tuple. We first set check to be true. We then set the value to be the first element in check tuple. And iterate through check tuple. If I does not equal to value, then check is false. And if it is true, then it will just remain true, right? Because we're checking if it's false. If it's false, that the value is the same. If it's false, then we will immediately know that, yeah, it's not the same. But immediately when, therefore, if the if statement doesn't run, it's good, because we don't want a conditional statement, in this case, to run if we want all the values in tuple to be the same. Okay, this is another way of doing the same thing. You can use the len function instead here. So previously, we were talking about going through the tuple element by element. A second example, going through using the length of the tuple, whereby we're checking if the tuple at that specific counter value does not equal to value, then check is false. And basically, it does the same logic for the conditional statement, but the core difference is in the second if statement, check tuple I is checking the exact value, whilst if I is equals to value, we're checking more of the counter value. There's a little bit of a minor distinction. If you're confused, post question in the comments below. More than happy to answer that. So another question, given a tuple length n, which for each value between 1 and n, write code to determine where there are any duplicate values. That is one of the biggest questions I think we can give you, because generally speaking, in competitive programming, tuples are a very niche data structure. They aren't really used, like I mentioned earlier. But in this case, the way you'd approach this is basically you would have a similar system to this, where you're checking if all tuples are the same. And you basically iterate through, check through from 1 to n. So it's basically a general sequence to do it. Now, do you have to do between 1 and n? No, but we've given it to be 1 and n, such that you can have any input value. So for example, you can input the value of n, work with that value of n, to then iterate through, and that is how it would work. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more of our content. This is Saha, signing out.